Rob, thanks for coming to your studio.
Hey, my pleasure. I'm glad I could be here today.
No problem. What are we talking about?
We are talking about commercial pricing.
So you and I come from two different sides of the industry.
We do.
So you shot amazing
food and booze. That's
food
how
and booze
I
is the way to do it.
Yeah.
And I say it's amazing because there's no way I could do what you do.
It takes skill. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, thanks. Thanks a lot. Appreciate that. We were talking just before we got started about the 90% rejection rate in this industry and how that kind of toys with your self-worth, don't you think?
Yeah, it's hard when you constantly hear no. That kind of rejection, you just have to get used to as fact. People are not going to like you.
It will still mess with you, and it'll still mess with your head, and you'll never get around it. But you become a little bit more desensitized to it and understanding that it's just doing business.
How did you deal with the rejection?
I have a little bit of a personality that's a little bit bigger, really effusive, and some people really, really liked it. Catalog companies liked it because you have to carry so much energy through an entire day of catalog shooting. But then if you're going to do like a one-shot or two-shot type of job, you know, they start looking at you, well, is this going to be too much of a spaz for our client that is spending a lot of retainer money with our agency? And it took me a long time to realize that until somebody pointed it out, like, you have to adjust.
So how did you know how to price yourself from the very beginning, or did you even know?
I threw numbers out there, and eventually at some point I wasn't getting any jobs at the numbers that I was throwing out, and then I just started adjusting them. During one phase of my career, the numbers that I was throwing out were too low.
Right.
And I got another job that I was asked to bid on, very similar to the previous 5 that I did not get. And I was just like, screw it. And I threw this like large fee number out, and like, boom, there it was. And I asked where I came in the bidding process, and they said, you had the highest number. And I said, why did you book me? It's like, well, you seem to have the most confidence. And I was like, when that went well, I did it again.
Right.
And it totally blew up in my face. It's like, you have no idea where you sit in the grand scheme of things. And so it gets really confusing really fast.
It does get confusing, and I think that's, again, where you have to get comfortable with the idea of being rejected. You have to do a number of bids to know how to price yourself.
And I think that's probably the most important thing, is to do as many bids as humanly possible.
Yeah.
Just put your stuff out there.
Yeah.
So, and if you can find anybody in an agency who will tell you, I did this a couple of times, who will tell you what they're working on, let you bid on it, have them look at it to tell you if you would have been in the running or not. If those opportunities come up, grab them, because there's no better wealth of information than that type of interactivity.
Honestly, I think that's a brilliant approach. I never asked to bid on something. I think that that's really a smart thing. And particularly when you know you're not going to be in the running, you just go through the exercise.
Yeah, there's
what a great way to learn.
Yeah, there's no holds barred at that point.
This business is totally relationship-based. And I think a lot of people are afraid to ask why. They find out they don't get the job, and they're like, shit. And they just kind of let it die. I think it's a good idea, if the people are open to it, to get an understanding of why. And sometimes it's just they went with somebody else. That's all.
And not only that, but the thing is that it's not even if they're open for it. No one's going to ding you for asking the question.
I remember I thought it was going to be like, man, if I ask that, oh, that's going to be bad.
And
maybe it was the people that were guiding me at the time. But
I think there's a lot of that sort of that's suffused within our industry. There's a lot of people that talk like, well, you better not ask that wrong question. They'll never talk to you again. It's like, never once. And I asked a lot of dumb questions because I didn't come from a formal background. You want to look smart in your bids, and I think that's critical. A lot of people don't understand that.
Yeah, and to that though, don't you think that there's times where you have to really explain why you have bid a job the way you have? Because I know that I got much better about putting together an estimate, being incredibly descriptive about the job and what we were going to do, but also writing a treatment about my production path. I think the more information you can give them about your production path and how you envision the job going,
that's it.
It justifies the different line items that you have in there.
Absolutely, you're defending your vision is essentially what you're doing.
Exactly.
And that comes with a certain amount of risk, but that's welcome to the game.
Yeah, I did this project for a company called Yogurtland, which was a soft serve ice cream. And they wanted to see soft serve ice cream swirling down into a bowl. And they asked photographers to bid it, and every photographer came back and said, sure, we'll do it. We're going to have an acrylic model made. And the client was totally opposed to that. Their legal team was like, no way. If a customer goes into the store and it doesn't look like what's on the poster, they're going to have an issue.
Right.
So they wanted it to be as representative as possible. So I guess I foolishly said, I'm going to do it. I can do it without using a model. I know I can figure it out. It was a huge risk. And I put in the estimate 2 solid days worth of testing. I don't know, let's see, I probably put in my fee at $2,000 for each one of those days. So it was not a cheap bit of experimentation, I could justify it by saying, look, everybody else is telling you you have to have an acrylic model. You have to go with plastic. It's not the real thing. I'll get you there, but I need you to know that I need time to experiment and to do it. But since I'm doing this for you, this is your problem that I'm solving, you have to pay me for it.
Of course.
And I think earlier in my career, I wouldn't have done that. I would have just figured it out and I would have eaten the cost.
Yeah, you sold the answer before having the answer. That's where the biggest growth spurts come.
Right.
And interestingly enough, those growth spurts translate into dollars, because if
do.
you have that kind of confidence and you have that kind of bravado and you actually deliver, then people start looking at you for those type of answers.
Right.
And it's like, and it raises confidence. If like, oh, if they can do that here, we have to have them on our shoes.
That's exactly right.
Yeah.
It's a risk, and you are putting yourself in kind of a precarious situation. But if you believe in your talents and you believe in your critical thinking, then take the risk on yourself, because there's nobody better to invest in.
So how did you start pricing? Like, how did this start coming together for you?
Well, pricing for me, I came up in the day where I apprenticed for another photographer for a year. You know, so I worked for several photographers. I started in Chicago. I had the true luxury of their guidance.
I see.
I did not always agree with it, but I was very fortunate to have them there. And I had kind of their built-in set of clients. As they were being asked to do jobs that really didn't fit their day rate, I was the lower echelon guy. My day rate was, $800, and didn't have much experience in the business at all. Had a book that was decent, but it was enough to have that client base and start to step up. So I know I went from 800 to like 1,200 pretty quickly. And then I jumped up to $2,000 a day and kind of hovered there for a little while. And then once I broke out on my own, that's when I started challenging myself to build better relationships with the art buyers, so I could get that feedback and I could know where my estimate was falling and push my rate up and up and up. And I also did a lot of research on my competitors, and I knew my main competitors were at $3,000 a day. I wanted to be there, and then I wanted to push past that. I went to $4,000 a day, and then ultimately when I signed a rep, like, nope, we're gonna do major markets and we're gonna add another $1,000 a day, be $5,000 a day plus usage. So, for me, most of my money was made on usage, not on the day rate. A job may only be 3-4 days long, which isn't bad. 15, 20 grand, that's not bad. But the real money came on the usage.
On the usage,
Yeah.
Usage expectations are now changing, where the client wants unlimited time, unlimited use, because it's being used in so many different places for so long. However, it's not really being used for that long, because photography seems to have this, is very ephemeral now, it seems like, in a lot of situations. How do you see the world unfolding now?
There's definitely been a huge shift. So really, kind of at the height of where my career had been, the usage was the driver. And clients would always buy for maybe a year or 3 years or unlimited. And one of the things I actually try to do, which I think people should do, is look out for the client dollar. Try to talk them out of buying usage when they don't need it. That might sound crazy. You want to make as much money as you possibly can, but at the same time, if you're looking out for the client's dollar, they get that you understand business, and they're going to come back to you more. You're
Essentially a deal maker. I mean, for a little bit of time until you actually get to be creative, you're being, for lack of a better term, a Hollywood deal maker. And so what is the best angle to make this deal happen?
Yeah, that's interesting. I haven't thought, but yeah, you're always cutting deals. I mean, that's what an estimate is. It's what your deal is on the job. So 15 images to produce, and I want my buyout to be $3,000 per image. Well, that's great. Are they going to go for that? So no, not necessarily. So we have to find that kind of middle ground. Like, what is the client really willing to spend? What am I willing to give up? And there are times where I would also say to them, look, I get that you only have $10,000 to buy these images. I can't give you the usage that you want for that. I can't give you 3 years, but I can give you a year. So there's room to negotiate, but you've got to make decisions for you on what you're comfortable with, and you need to track that.
Right, and you also have to gauge your client, like how much do they understand about what usage is? Is it worth the effort? Is it not worth the effort?
Yeah.
Do they understand that they don't have to buy 3 years just because they've heard it the whole time?
Right.
It's like you said, I can give you a year for that. It's like, oh, we can do that?
The first thing I would do is really talk to them about where they are in the evolution of the product and where they think it's going to go. And almost inevitably, they were talking about the next steps. And I'm like, you know what? Let's look at this, because that unlimited usage is going to cost you a lot of money. And I don't think you have that 25 grand to do that. So let's look at doing it only for 2 years, because to me it sounds like in a year, you're changing the design of this bottle anyway. You're gonna evolve this label. Once you really get this out into the marketplace and you start getting customer feedback, you're gonna make some changes. So maybe not spend that money now on usage that you're really not gonna be able to capitalize on. If you buy unlimited usage that gives you 10 years to use this image, 20 years, you're not gonna use this image in 20 years. It's not gonna be around, it's gonna be totally dated. So pull that back, put the money into something else. Clients love that kind of thinking.
When continuing usage came up, like how did you price it? Like, was it a percentage of the original usage fee? Was it a percentage of the thing? And like I've had this discussion with a lot of people. I was the type of person who never had a separate creative fee. I just had a fee, which included usage.
Yeah.
Because my thinking, which worked, was if they came back for continuing usage, it would be a percentage based on that number, as opposed to just the usage number. If I had separated it out, then I could only cite the usage number and then give them a percentage of that, where if I combined everything, it was a higher number and give them a percentage of that.
Right. It's almost more confusing now than any time in the history of photography.
One of the things that I'm telling people is go for as much money up front as you can now.
Yeah.
Get as much as you can from the original gig.
Yeah.
And then say goodbye.
You can always come down, but you can never go up with your pricing.
Exactly, that's exactly it. So just sell them as hard as you can, because I think in a lot of situations, continuing usage is going away in a lot of situations.
Yeah, I think that there are changes in it.
Definitely.
Which is unfortunate.
And it is unfortunate, and it's not absolute across the board. That's why you have to really be careful and not adopt that as a paradigm.
Yeah, and there's sectors where it doesn't apply.
Right.
Like, usage really doesn't apply in editorial.
No.
Editorial.
They're
clients,
dictating.
Yeah, they dictate the price.
We want you to shoot this thing. Great. I'd like $3,000. That's great. We have $2,000.
Right.
Actually, that's a question for you.
Yeah.
Did you ever have to find the key person to make happy so they could bring everybody else on board? Was that ever? Did you ever do that?
Oh yeah. In multiple different ways, I had to do that. First of all, I effectively had layers of clients, and you did too, I'm sure. Yeah. I had the agency that hired me. And there was usually, the art director, the creative director. I had a closer relationship with one of the two over the other, right? So I was usually keyed into that person who I had worked with the most.
Right.
And then we had the brand. So there was definitely kind of this layer that I had to work with. I was very sensitive to the agency that hired me because I wanted them to hire me again.
Right.
I know that they may lose that client, but they're going to gain a new client, and I want to go with them whoever they're working with. I think I became very skilled at listening to what all the clients wanted, and then figuring out how I could guide them to the decision that I wanted them to have.
Did you find you have to do that a lot?
Yeah, I found that I would have to hear differing points of view, and I would say, absolutely, we can do that. If we incorporate this idea, we're going to achieve X, but we're going to sacrifice Y and Z, because I wanted to steer them away from it. Now, sometimes I could do that just by the suggestion of it, and then we wouldn't have to deal with it.
This is making an assumption that a lot of people who are involved on the other side, on the client side, on the agency side, are without heart. And they're actually mostly empathetic people. They do have some understanding of what's going on.
Yeah, it's the account executives were always the tough one.
I don't even talk about it.
Because we should.
Yeah,
because they're the ones that are really looking out for the client. And they're the ones that drive the creatives nuts. It's like they're on the wrong side.
They're on the wrong side. And one thing that I found to be true is account executives that are more seasoned are more cool, and account executives that are younger, in my case, this isn't across the board, but I got thrown under the bus so they could make a point, so they could look like they were on it.
No, it's across the board.
Is it? Okay, good.
Yeah, I can tell you that. That's absolutely the case. When an account executive has been around, they definitely have an understanding of all sides.
Right.
And the newer account executives are like bulldogs for the client. And they come in way too hard. There's nothing deft about their touch, so to speak.
No, not at all.
Another big question that is super important in this day and age is the client going to be there for approval, or they're working remotely?
Right.
I cannot tell you how much that has killed productivity on a job. When a client has to have approval, but they refuse to come to the studio and give you the attention that the job needs because they're in meetings or other stuff.
If it's remote, it's going to be problematic.
Oh, absolutely. I have had many situations, and I really did learn the hard way that nothing makes you crazier than when you've got food on set and it's dying and the client isn't responding because they're in a meeting or they're doing something else, that just doesn't work.
Yeah.
You wind up pushing everybody into overtime, the days get longer, and then you've got to justify to them why it went over when they were the cause of it. I've said to clients, I understand the problems that you have or the challenges that you have in that you can't be here. I will tell you that that adds time to the shoot no matter what.
Right.
So I'm going to make the shoot longer. I'm going to add in that built-in overtime. If we don't need it, fine, but at least you know it's in the estimate and we can be prepared for it. I don't want you to be surprised later. I'd rather put that number in now. You know, my sets, they look like they're small. It's a burger and a salad or, you know, a cocktail and a bottle. The set's actually like 25 feet in width and 18 feet deep, and I've got booms and lights and kind of stuff everywhere. Working remotely, they're like, oh, just move that to the left, get, you know, 2 inches.
Oh, so they don't have any concept
Well, they don't have any concept
Yeah.
of the space.
Yeah.
They have no concept of what camera I'm using, what lens I'm using. They don't understand that perspective. When they're here in the studio, they can see it, and I can walk them through it, and I can explain those challenges really simply. When they're remote, they're like, oh, just, they wind up ordering so many changes that you just cannot do in an effective and fast manner and then come back with exactly what they want. They're not here and they can't see it. And that's something that I've tried to gently explain to clients in the bidding process. And I think way too many photographers nowadays don't do that with clients. They're not protective of their own process, and they're too loose in saying, yeah, just we'll work remotely. I'll send you JPEGs, it'll be great.
And it really comes under the heading of, again, advocating for the clients. Like, I want to tell you, like, I'm happy to work within the parameters that you've got, but let me tell you why I think it's a bad idea, and then you can make the ultimate decision.
You know, and sometimes they're not thinking about it from your perspective. It's not that they're trying to be uncool.
No, that's just not the world.
Right, and they don't understand how you work. I mean, one of the things I've always thought was smart on my part was when I have a new client come in the studio and we haven't worked together, first of all, I do a pre-light the day before, and I have an image that's ready to go so that they can see like where I am. And hopefully I'm actually at a point where we're just kind of fine-tuning. I'm not at a point where it's like, well, we got to start over. But the first thing I do is I sit them all down at the table and welcome them, but say, hey, you know, since we haven't had an opportunity to work together, I just want you to understand my process. Here's how I go about doing what I do. That kind of sets the tone for expectation because, you know, it's weird when you walk into a studio for the first time, when you're getting people together for the first time, and you have to make art by 5 o'clock or 5:30 so everybody can go home and get their kids or get on a plane. It's very hard for everybody to gel quickly. So if being the leader of the pack, so to speak, if you're the one in charge, if you just say, hey, this is my process, this is what I'm going to do, this is what you can expect, it completely changes the tone. They're like, oh, okay, I get it. Now I know how I can kind of work and what kind of feedback I can.
So it's interesting that you said that when we were talking a little bit earlier about, you know, taking a little bit of swagger into the shoot.
Yeah.
For me, it was very much like, I need to shoot on location. I need to shoot here because this is how I feel it's going to flow the best.
Right.
And it's not really so much about process as much like this is my art, man, and this is how I'm doing it. And like I said before, like sometimes that works really, really well, and sometimes it doesn't work so hot. But the thing is that you do have to sort of raise awareness about why you're doing what you're doing so they understand it. They don't want to be you. They don't want to take the job away from you. Right. But I think it helps if they understand why you are the way you are.
But it's important. It's important to get them on the same page as you. And like I said, I like playing my game on their level.
Yeah.
I want to get them, you know, understanding of who I am, and then let me make my art.
What are the questions that you ask the art buyer? This is before the creative call. This is we want you to bid the job. You're not going to talk to the art director yet, but we need to start getting a sense of how this is going to come together. We're going to send you the brief, or you've seen the brief. What are some of the questions that you're asking?
There's a bunch of stuff I want to know. One, I absolutely want to see a brief, or any kind of go by, any comp that they have, and hopefully they put together a deck. And these days they're doing a much better job of putting together decks that really have kind of a lookbook to it. It's like this is really the style we're going for. And one of the things that I find, clients are putting in a lot of my images into the lookbook, into the deck. They're going to my website and they're taking swipes. So based on what I'm seeing, I want to know what it is about those images of mine they like, why the art director was keying into those particular images. That's going to speak to what I've done in the past and what I should probably do here as well.
Right.
I always talk to them first and foremost about timing. When do they want to shoot this? How long are they expecting the shoot to be? Because they have an idea in their head. They're thinking 1 day, 3 days. They have an idea.
That's one of my favorite lines when I talk about money. It's like, you have a number inside your head. I'd like to know where that number is.
They always have a number. And you know, you can ask what the budget is, and I often do. I don't always. Sometimes I just don't feel it's necessary. But what is necessary is to get the client's sense of parameters. How long is the shoot going to be? What are they expecting in terms of crew? How many of the clients are actually going to attend the shoot? I want to know things like that. Like how many people are going to be there, because that's going to indicate catering budget. If we only have 2 people, that's a very different catering budget over 5 days than 20 people.
Right.
Always ask a question of usage, both time and region. An image that's being shot and is only going to be shown in North America for 1 year is a very different fee than an image that's going to be global for unlimited time. So I definitely want those parameters. In some ways, it's more important to get those pieces of information than the budget, because I know that that's kind of what they're thinking. Or I can guide them in a different way and say, you know, I know in our conversation we were talking about this only being a 2-day shoot. I think realistically, with the number of shots and the amount of props and the number of clients that's going to be there, this needs to be a 3-day shoot, and here's why. So as much information as I can get up front is going to help me justify what I do in the estimate. And then the other thing I really want to know is timing. When does it need to be shot? When does it need to be approved? When does it need to be retouched? When does it need to be delivered?
Right.
Because all of
That's
that
critical.
is, it's really critical. Because if I've got to bring in I need to know if I need to have a digital artist, you know, in my studio working on days 1 images on day 2 while I'm shooting day 2, or can it just wait? Like, what's the timing? Because that might be a different price. If I've got to get crew in here in a hurry and there's more people that have to be involved, it's going to affect the price. So timing is really critical. And it also speaks to me whether I'm going to be able to do the job or not. One thing I learned, it's a really bad idea to ask about timing to bid on a project when you know you can't fit it into your calendar, because if you win it and then
turn it down,
you have to turn it down. And that I did that a few times. I'm like,
yeah, right.
Man, I'm just gonna bid on it, and if I get it, I'll figure it out. The one thing that I think is an absolute rule is you have to have a really solid understanding of how you shoot a job.
Absolutely.
That is your production path, and it's the money that you need to make. So it's your calculations as a businessman, and it's how you shoot. That you need to be pretty rigid about, at least in explaining, because if the client understands that, they can articulate what they really want, and that gives you leeway to kind of change the way you're operating or make decisions, or say, you know what, I can sacrifice this because I'm going to get that. Or I think the more upfront you can be with information, but know exactly how you want to produce something, exactly what you need to make as a businessman, then you've got really the power to do what you want to do.
I think it's called artistic self-awareness.
Yeah.
So I think that's.
Do you think people in the business today, coming in that business today, have that self-awareness?
It's a good question, because I think there's a lot of people coming into the business today that seem to think that it's all very easy because digital photography has been made to look so simple.
Yeah.
I've had this discussion with several agents where young photographers who did well on Instagram, got some attention, did a shoot, did pretty good with that shoot, and then they had to do it again, and they failed because they didn't understand their process or how to produce it again. And a art producer and I were talking, and she asked, well, what defines a professional now? And I said, somebody who can show you a picture and say, I can do this day in and day out. It's to be able to repeat the art over and over and over again for whoever wants to see it or whoever books you for it. And
that's understanding your process.
Yeah,
that's understanding your own production
that's self-awareness. And so I think that's where it is.
Yeah.
I think the world's changing rapidly, but as it's changing rapidly, there's a lot of things that are still the same. And I think letting people know what those things are is absolutely critical so anybody can make a living at this.
Yeah, you know, the business is changing, but I think that the more opportunity young photographers have that are entering the market can learn from people like us who have been around. Some of the principles are still the same. It's just a matter of adapting them to the way business is working now.
Right.
It's changing, and it's going to keep changing. You know, it'll be interesting to see where the business of photography is in 20 years. I have no idea what it's going to look like.
We should have this conversation in 20 years.
Let's do that. Let's have it in 10, and let's have it again in 20.
I think that's a great idea.
All right, let's do it.
All right, cool. Right on. Thanks, man. Good to see you.
Good to see you.